you have your Bibles, I want you to turn with me to Job. We have 10 weeks into this, and we have kind of shifted gears throughout, so I'm going to kind of real fast summarize what the last 10 weeks have looked like to get to where we are as we close this series after 10 weeks. But it is transformed, and what it looks like. We've read every week from Romans chapter 12. I'm going to start there, although I'm reading today from Job. Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, it says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed. Everybody say conformed. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed. Say transformed. All right, with a little more excitement. Say transformed. There you go. To be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is the good and acceptable and perfect will. All right, so right here, this is what it says. This is what we've been doing for 2 weeks, is that it says there's two things that can be taking place right now in our lives. Our lives are being either deformed or transformed, and that we are who we are. We are this person, a shell of who we are, through two main things. Our relationship with God and our relationship with people. And oftentimes our relationship with people has deformed us in such a way, and as it has deformed us, it's caused us to walk in a deformed state with God. That He called us, created us as humans, but we have been dehumanized, and in the dehumanized process that we are continuing to further ourselves from what God's called us to be. We've been working through this definition for 10 weeks as well. This definition is the discipleship to Jesus is a continual surrender of all of life to God's good design for identity, purpose, and belonging. All of life for all of life. You have all of my life for all of my life. That there's not an area of my life that I've not opened to you. There's not an area of my life that's closed off to you. There's not an area to my life that goes, that's too painful. There's nothing in my life that I go, no, too much. This is the prayer. All of life for all of life. That's discipleship. And so what we've been talking about for about 7 weeks is oftentimes this is a long, slow, deep formation. That it takes time. Would everybody agree that God has been working? He's still working on me. Like that's a real song that's in our life. He's working on us. He's transforming us, but it's a long, slow process. And in this long, slow process, if we're not careful, we lose hope. I want everybody to look at me real fast. The long, slow the years of the normal Tuesdays of life trying to work through our transformation, it'll cause us to lose hope. The enemy will go, look, he has failed you now, right? Where is he now? What is this now? If God's so good, why are you walking in pain? It will cause us to lose hope. And this is where I'm wanting to kind of book in this truth. Have you ever surrendered to God? Have you ever given your heart to God, go, you have all of me, and then all of a sudden pain is involved? You have all of me, and the next thing you know, you find yourself moving backwards from the very thing that God's called. You have all of me. I surrender my life only to have more storms in my life. Anybody? That it's in this place where we were reading with Mark chapter 5, 7 weeks ago we started. And then this week we're going to read in Job. That as we were speaking to God, I long for you to do this work. It said it in Mark chapter 5. And as he was speaking, someone came, interrupted him, and said, oh, by the way, Jairus, your daughter's dead. I'm coming for transformation. I'm making my way. I'm pleading now before God that He'd do a work. And the Bible said, and while he was yet speaking, they came and said, hey, your daughter's dead. But the thing that I'm seeking for and wanting is getting worse. All the way that if you know the story of Job, we'll find out in a second that, and while they were speaking, another one came. And while they were speaking, another one came. Isn't it so hard to see that God's at work while one thing after another starts stacking? Bad day turns into bad week turns into bad months and a couple years, and the next thing you know, you go, this whole transforming process isn't taking place. Right? 2 Corinthians 3 says it's 1 degree of glory to the next, that it's just 1 degree. It doesn't seem like it's this quick, fast process. Don't lose hope. When you don't see Him, when you don't feel Him, or if you feel pain, He's at work in transformation. To summarize last couple weeks, this is it. Surrendering is moving yourself to a place where there is nothing distracting you from your view of God. That you're moving aside, making space for God to step in and do a work, all the while waiting. All right, so long, slow process moves into this immediate, oftentimes transformation into what this week is, sometimes even a painful process. Best analogy I can think of is this. For everyone who has been a part of having a baby, is it not a long, slow 9 months? Anybody? There should be a few more people shaking their heads right now at me. It's a long, slow process. And in the long, slow process, all of a sudden, immediately water breaks, right? Forrest knows what I'm talking about. Like immediately, like water breaks. And it's in this thing that you go from this long, slow process to immediately to then what? Pain is involved. And it all leads to something beautiful. There's this beautiful transformation that takes place, but in the moment of it, it seems so not normal. Long, slow, immediate pain. This is where we're going to jump in this week. All right, so I asked Addie for this permission to tell a story. I want to tell a story. All she said was, will you just preface it with, I was really young. All right, so I'm going to preface it. When Addie was really young and she would get a splinter, it was one of the worst things you could ever imagine. The first time I went to her with a splinter, I did literally open my knife. She was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. And she's like, you're going to cut me. I'm like, yeah. Actually, I guess I never thought that through. I am bringing a knife towards you, and all I've ever seen is like, and I'll never forget, she was like, nah, like screaming out of control. And so I was like, okay, I'll go get Brooke. Brooke, can you help? It's a splinter, right? Like it's a bad splinter, which by the way, I didn't even know she had. It was a day later. She was like giving me one of these. I'm like, what's wrong? She lifts up her foot and it's red and infected already. I'm like, oh, it's a splinter. I got you. She's like, Brooke says, I'll calm her down. We're going to get fingernail clippers. And what we're going to do is she walked through the process and she was like, no. Anybody ever dealt with a kid like that? To the point that I was just like, God is still working on me. I said, grab her. And I just grab her foot and I'm not kidding, and I have my knife and I'm digging to the point, I don't know who's yelling louder, Brooke or Addie. Ah! Ah! Brooke's yelling, the neighbors think we're beating our children. I literally go, and I dig it out. And she's doing the whole like, you're psycho. You cut my foot. And I'm like, splinter's out, whatever. To the point, let that happen again. She got a splinter, she would never tell us. Am I kidding? She would never tell us. And if she did, she'd be like, you could tell she's hurting. Every time. Until one day, finally, she was like, just do it, I'm not going to look. She got a little older, a little wiser. She realized it's part of the process. It's a temporary pain, but I promise it's better. Okay, fast forward from splinter to, there was a season where Addie was getting a lot of strep throat. And the very first time they were like, will you open your mouth? And they're like, and did that whole like thing. From that moment on, when a doctor was like, open your mouth, she's like, I'm not kidding. She had a really high fever. We were sure it was strep throat. We may let it go a little bit too long not knowing it was strep throat. And we were like, yeah, we got to get the medicine for strep throat. Like, well, we have to test her. I'm like, okay. Somehow Brooke worked it out that I took her and not her. I was alone in the process. She had been a part of the scarring process. And so I already told the nurses, I was like, I'm pretty sure she has strep. This is going to be difficult, but y'all are professionals. Figure it out. This lady comes in and she tries, and she's like, I can do this. And she calls for a male nurse. And all of a sudden the male nurse comes in and he does the whole and my sweet little Addie had the strength of 1,000 suns in the moment. I don't remember everything, but I just remember they looked at me, and the doctor now has come in because it's making such commotion. The splinter times 100. That the doctor walked in and looked at me and was like, Dad, I failed in some area, or like, do something. And I'll never forget that I was like, I love you. And I love her. But he was like, I literally, through her tears and the look on her face like betrayal. My dad, I was literally like, my legs are on her, my arm. Is any parent, some of y'all look at me like you've never done this. No, I'm the only one? Okay, whatever. Cool. I'm sitting on my little girl with my legs and my arm, and I've pried her mouth, and I'm like, do it, lady, do it. And it's in that moment I feel like for just a moment, I felt just for a second, I wrote this week. I think I saw the relationship with God and us and pain and sufferings that brings transformation. I'm literally doing this to help you. I'm doing this so you don't die. This seems painful, but I promise it's a process. That I'm longing for us in the transformation for us to get this. For us to truly understand and know that God is oftentimes transforming us through pain and through suffering. Through difficulty and discomfort. And by the way, the Bible doesn't paint an inconsistent picture of what reality of our life is. The Bible is so full of brokenness. From the beginning to end, the hurt and the suffering that brings a Savior. It is this cycle. We see it. It should not be this, it's just, what is this? It's an inconsistency. No, this is very consistent with the world that we live in. It's only within the 100 years that we've lived in that we now live in a time. There's never been a generation that has lived in a time that the primary expectation is happiness. That we deserve to be happy. We are longing to be happy. For the years before, the last 100 years of the life that we now live in, it was, we live in a world of survival. I'll never forget, my grandparents are married over 50 years to each other, and someone was like, what's the key to happiness and joy and love in this thing? And she was like, what does happiness got to do with it? We're just married to each other. I'm not curious. And she said that with a serious look on her face. She was like, we made it a commitment. Why are you talking about happiness? I understand and know that we now live in a time that's almost poisonous to us. That we think we can't, if we're children of God, there's no pain. There should be no suffering. Actually, studies are showing it's what's causing a world to be more depressed and with more anxiety because we have an unrealistic expectation of what our life should look like. That's inconsistent with history and this world that we've ever studied, read, and seen. And so we'll find ourselves more depressed, more anxiety because there's pain and suffering going, wait, stop. I'm a child of God. Yeah, let's steer into this. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes he does the whole, this is for your own good. So to believe and know that this walking out transformation process, it can be a life that we live with pain, a surrendering of loss, a surrendering in difficulty that we are actually able to be people of joy still. To know that it's kind of weird and peculiar to even talk about that there's pain, suffering, and loss, and then to go, but we can still have joy. That's a peculiar group of people, but isn't that what he called us to be? It doesn't make any sense. So in the middle of the Bible, I've told you to turn to Job, about in the middle of the Bible, there's 3 books, and they're called the wisdom literature, but I want to pull from Ecclesiastes and Job to see something. I want you to see in Ecclesiastes that King Solomon, one of the most wealthy people in the world, of his time, of the time that now we're even living in, he said he made a vow. So Ecclesiastes 1, I know I told you to turn to Job, but I'm just going to read something from Ecclesiastes 1:13. I've devoted myself to search for understanding and to explore by wisdom everything being done under the sun. This is what he's saying. I set my heart to discover and to see what this life is really worth living for. All right, and you can see it in 1 Kings, you can see it in Ecclesiastes, you can see his story. This is his story. I'm going to spend my life with all the resources, which, by the way, whatever you think is rich and whatever you think someone is, well, like Bill Gates kind of thing, can't touch what Solomon had. In the time and the world that he lived, he had it all. And to know that he said, here's what I want to do. I think what brings me joy is partying, right? And when I say the word partying, I know some of you are like, yeah, I had a season of partying. That ain't what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about he went hard at this. He said, I'm going to go all out. So what does he do? He throws a party, invites a couple friends, and he goes, that was awesome. Had a good time. Does it again. He goes, not as fun. I know what to do. More people, better entertainment, better food. Let's do this. They throw it in. That was good until it wasn't. So he does it again. All the way that you can read some of his parties. One of his parties you can read is that he literally could have fed all of Greenville County. I went back and looked. 1,000 chickens, 42 bulls. I have no idea how many goats they're eating. Like, this was a feast and a party, has the greatest entertainment time in that time, has the greatest people, the most important, influential people are all there, all for him to go, it's not enough. There's something I kind of want more. That's not it. So to know and understand that he looked through people, entertainment, food, some people are seeking all that he turns to his heart to pleasure. So he finds pleasure in one wife. And he says if one wife is good, then 7 must be good. And if 7's good, then 700 must be better, with 300 concubines. And to know that there is not a single sexual experience that Solomon withheld from himself. Solomon gives himself over to pleasure, but it was never enough. He always needed and wanted more. So he moves to the next one. Okay, so I've had the food, the entertainment, the music, the people. I got all the things, like status. I got it, right? And I got the pleasure. Okay, I've had all the pleasure there is this world has to offer. Okay, here's what maybe if I acquire things. So he moves into real estate, right? Has homes, barns, what I would say farms and ranches. Like that would be the top of my list, right? Like to have all that vineyards. Like he has it all, only to realize that's not enough. In the acquiring, it's not enough. So then he moves a little further into leisure, right? Like how many of us would then go to this place to go, hey, if I'm wanting anything out of life, it's to work hard just so I don't have to work hard. I just can't wait to get to a place where it's just leisure. Like think of a day in Solomon's life where he's like, all right, now I've arrived. Like I've done it all, I've conquered all. It wasn't enough. So what I'm supposed to, probably the greatest thing of life is leisure and do nothing. Probably the greatest thing of life is to wake up, have my coffee, have a massage, go on a walk with one of my many wives, go look at my vineyards, check it all out, enjoy life, only for him to come back and say these things. He writes a chipper little book and he says, at the end is meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And there is nothing under the sun that is satisfying the hearts of man. I want you to hear my heart for a second. I don't know what you're going hard after in your life. If it's not transformation, I promise you'll be left empty. It's not enough. You can conquer, you can achieve, you can have, but you'll be found with nothing. So to know that if we flip this story, right? This is 2 stories telling the same story, Ecclesiastes and Job, telling the same story coming from 2 different directions. If we were to flip this over, now Job loses everything and he finds out that God's enough. Solomon gets everything this world is chasing after. And by the way, when I say he had it, and when you think you've arrived, no, I'm talking about he arrived. And he came back to say these words, whatever you think you're chasing after, it won't do it. It's not enough. Only to find that the same story of it's not enough, that he gained it all to say it's not enough, Job loses it all to go, but God's enough. Job loses everything. These 2 books play off each other. Job, chapter 1, 1 and 3. There once was a man named Job who lived in the land of Uz. And he was blameless, a man of complete integrity. He feared God, stayed away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 teams of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and he had many servants. He was, in fact, the richest person of that entire time. This is what Satan said. Don't have time to read through all of it. Satan said, of course he has. Of course he's a happy man. Of course he walks in joy and happiness. It's because of all the things you've given him, right? As if stuff is what brings us joy and happiness and not knowing God. I'm going to say that again. As if all you have is what brings you stability, security, as if that's what brings us happiness and true joy. That's what Satan says. That's all they want. I know that's all they want, and if you were to take that from him, I promise you, he'll curse you. We know the story. I don't know what your worst day ever is. It's not this. He loses everything. He loses everything, everybody that's close to him. Job chapter 1, go down to verse 20. After he's lost everything, after one guy was speaking, yet another guy comes while he was speaking, another guy comes while he was speaking. He's lost it all. Job stood up, tore his robe in grief. Then he shaved his head and he fell to the ground to worship. He said, I came naked from my mother's womb, and naked I will leave this world. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord takes away. Praise the name of the Lord. In all of this, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong by blaming him. Look at me. He's a better man than all of us. How many of us have made charge against God for way less? Listen, it's not been but 2 weeks ago. Some of y'all are making charge against God because I don't have internet and Netflix. How could you, God? I'm serious. To know that what we thought was this, many of us had the comfort taken from us, security taken from us to go, now what am I supposed to do? Making charges against God. I want to say something. This part right here, we see he's a very peculiar person. He's so peculiar that he's lost it all. There's pain, there's hurt, and in the process he says, but I know God. And God has transformed my life in such a way that I know Him. And if you take everything that you think holds value, the greatest thing that I have is a personal, intimate relationship with God, knowing Him and Him transforming me. Satan comes back and says, yeah, but you gave him his health. Right? Which, by the way, in the story, I love this part about it because chapter 2, again, Satan and God have a interaction, and God's like, hey, what are you doing? Satan's like, I'm the accuser of the brother, looking who I can find. What are you doing? And God's like, oh, just not, you hear that? Oh yeah, that's Job worshiping me right now. How you doing, Satan? Like, maybe you don't think he talks smack. I thought he was just like, I'm just listening to the worship of Job in my life. What are you doing? Oh, he's worshiping you because, okay, it's his health. If you touch his body, that's what it is. You give him a sickness, you give him pain, it'll mess with you mentally. It will cause you to walk in a fear that you've never walked in. Let me touch him physically. And God goes, you can touch him, just don't kill him. We know the story. Pain. Job chapter 2 now. Flip over one chapter, verse 7 and 9. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord, and he struck Job with painful blows, from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. And he took for himself a potsherd. With it he scraped himself, while he sat in the midst of ashes. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. All right, just so you know, my dad has a doctorate in grief counseling. He's walked me through grief counseling and the stages of it. I know the stages. I would be right here at the bartering stage. Give me my dog back and take her. I'll trade with you right now. And I know some of y'all are laughing. The bartering stage of like, I don't need these people in my life right now. This is a side note. Don't even have time to get in this. I want you to hear something. That is sometimes in the moments of transformation, in the pain, it's the people that are in your life that oftentimes the true transformation is that He's working on you to love hard to love people. That's sometimes the truer part of transformation. And right here, Job says, but he said to her, you speak as one foolish woman. Shall we indeed accept the good of God? And shall we not accept the adversity? In all of this, Job did not sin with his lips. Look, I already said it a second ago, I don't know what your worst day is, but it's not this day. At the worst that we could ever have, there comes to this place where Job is able to say the exact words that King Solomon said, but in a whole different angle. God has been the only thing that's enough in my life. It is but God. The knowing Him peace is it. Coming from this side of having it all and achieving it, only to go, yeah, none of that did it. It was knowing God. It's His intimate walking work in me. So this is actually my prayer. This is my prayer through this whole 10-week series. If we're not careful, we're going to be a group of people that we're seeking for happiness, for joy, in the tangible. We will be a group of people that it hinges on, if you, then I. This is what I'm praying. I'm praying that your transformation does not hinge on your happiness or health. I'm praying that your pursuit is not so painful that you pull back. I want you to hear my heart on this for a second. In this place, we can tell the story of Job. We could tell a few other stories. What about your story? Has pain been a part of your life? Have you found yourself pulling back? It happens all the time. For some, as young men, let them get hurt in grade school, middle school. Let them get hurt, and all of a sudden they'll build this wall, this callous wall of like, I'll never get hurt again. I'll make sure that I never let someone in such a way that they hurt me like this again. So much that you don't have a personal, intimate relationship with God because you've not let Him in, or your wife or your children. I was one of those. I'll be so calloused in such a way that I won't let the transformation of God work Himself through us walking together, knowing Him, or knowing people. Don't forget, we are formed or deformed by knowing God in a relationship and knowing people in a relationship. That so many times God says this, He talked about marriage, when He talked about knowing and loving people, this is often a reflection of this. And because of this shell and these walls that we put up to go, I've been hurt, pain, suffering. No, I'm not going there again. So much that when we started this series that we talked about this. It is not going to be okay for us to walk in this woke culture that everything offends us. We're so offended people. And so we get to choose if we opt in or opt out. That's too painful, too painful. What are you talking about? To know that I'm triggered. I'm just too triggered. Stop it. We don't get to live in that world. We don't get to go, it's triggering me, it hurts me, too much pain. You kidding me? We don't get to opt out of pain. We don't get to go, no, that triggers. It hits me in a place that I've said I'll never go back to. Stop it. Do not get to a place that we've now shielded and shelled ourselves in such a way, isolated and insulated ourselves in such a way from God and people that we can't be transformed. It is going to take vulnerability. It is going to take sitting in ashes, oftentimes with brokenness. It's going to take oftentimes when everybody, including the ones closest to you, your friends and your spouse, still are not encouraging you the way it needs to be encouraged. That was never your hope and joy anyway, was it? It was this. My prayer is that your pursuit is not so painful that you pull back, and you isolate, insulate. And my prayer, and I'm praying that God will use anything, anyone, any situation to transform you. I'm going to ask for the worship team to come around. In closing with a 10-week series, this has been something that I don't know that I've ever really done a series in such a way in my own heart and mind that I felt like I was beginning with the end in mind. That I was beginning with the end in mind, knowing this truth. I long for transformation. We're going to pray some prayers every week. I'm going to ask you to move the physical into the spiritual in some areas. I'm going to ask you to start just moving towards transformation. It's painful. I know, move. Yeah, that's uncomfortable. I know, move. We were beginning with the end in mind for this one prayer. Dear God, may we walk as transformed people. God, I don't care what it takes. I don't care if it's temporary pain. I don't care if it's uncomfortable. Move on our behalf. I've asked for the worship team to come around. But as they move, I'm going to ask you to now move. Either right where you sit or here. In just a moment, I'm going to ask kind of for two things. In just a moment, when I close in prayer, I'm going to ask for anybody in this room that says, I am in the journey of transformation. It could be one of the three things. This has been a long, slow, deep forming process. It's taking time, but I know that He's not done yet. I've not met my full potential of what God's calling me to in transformation. If that's you, then I want to ask you to come and let somebody pray with you to go, will you pray with me? Either right where you are or right here. And for some, that you are at this place of the immediate. We saw God work through the immediate. That He's at the place of going, I need this immediately. This is an immediate transformation. Help. We've been saying this from the beginning. Is sanctification and transformation, is it a long, slow process or immediate? Yes. Yes. Is sanctification instantaneous or process? Yes. Yes. Here's what I'm going to pray on this part. The This third part. If there's anybody in this room who physically, you go, hey, listen, mentally I'm in a place that yeah, but physically. Either doctors have called, given a bad report, you are a chronic pain, or mentally you are depressed. And you cannot break out of the prison of deformed thinking, lies from hell. In just a moment, when we close in prayer, they're going to come around and sing a song. It's not about the song, it's about you moving and meeting with God for the next few moments. It's about praying the prayer as simple as this. Do anything you need to do. Use anybody you need to use to transform my life. I don't know how many more days, months, or years I have here on this earth. I'm asking you to use the days that I have. I'll never get this season back with my children again. I don't want to keep walking deformed as a father, as a mother. I long to walk transformed. I'm going to pray this prayer, either right where you are or right here, I'm going to have you come. And I'm going to have the elders to come and pray with those that are here and those that are sick. Father, how do we wrap up a 10-week series of your word? It is in the truth that there has not been one time that at our worst you've moved away from us. In transformation, you've moved towards us. You're moving to us. You did not die for a better future version of us. You died for the broken that we are right now. Even. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm asking you, Father, that as we move towards you now, knowing that you've moved towards us, in the pain we move towards you, in the suffering we move towards you. As we move towards you, would you now do what you promised you'd do? Would you meet with us? Those who are hungry and thirst after righteousness. Those who said, if you're sick, come stand before the elders and let them pray for you. Would you, for the next few moments, not make it about a song, make it about us moving towards you. Church, these altars are open for anything or either right where you are. I'm going to ask you to move right now.